Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Dana again, and today you're at Research Road. This is a weekly series where we go through science and tech news with a bit of dry humor. Then we answer some questions from y'all. Today is the 19th of November, 2024, and on this date in 1969, as part of the Apollo 12 mission, Charles Pete Conrad and Alan L. Bean became the third and fourth person to walk on the moon. So, starting off with tech news, a Norwegian startup called Factiverse plans to harness the power of AI to fight disinformation. Interestingly, it is not built on a large language model. It's built on a more curated information set. Russia is moving towards banning content that promotes being childless. And now on to space. Starting off with something straight out of science fiction, Project Hyperion has opened a design competition for the habitat portion of a Generation ship. For those who aren't Star Trek fans, this is a ship that will carry its occupants and their descendants for an incredible length of time. In this case, the ship is supposed to carry a population of about 1,000 people for 250 years. So get yourself an architectural designer, an engineer, and a social scientist together. You have to register by December 15th, and I'll put a link down below on this one for more information. The far side of the moon once had active volcanoes. NASA and the Russia Space Agency are arguing over whether or not a leak in the Russian segment of the International Space Station is something that could lead to a catastrophic failure. Russia seems to think it's not as huge a deal as NASA believes. This debate is leading to a renewed push for a new U.S. space station. Also, NASA wants new spacesuits. The latest design is from the 90s, so they probably need them. Vintage clothing's cool, but maybe not for spacesuits. Now it's time to talk about the developing climate crisis. Despite having been talked about on the channels for years and being predicted by the Pentagon, a new study has established the first causal link between climate change and the increase in dengue fever cases. An international team looking through satellite information has said that freshwater on Earth dropped suddenly in 2014. They're saying the Earth lost about 2.5 times the volume of Lake Erie. In the world of animals, scientists taught rats to drive tiny cars. It seems the rats enjoyed it. Some of them would walk longer routes to drive to get a Fruit Loop instead of walk on a shorter route and getting the same reward. Authorities are reportedly offering a $100,000 reward for information about the death of a Mexican gray wolf named Hope near Flagstaff, Arizona. In health news, avian flu is reported to have reached Hawaii after officials say it was detected in some birds there. U.S. health officials have confirmed the first U.S. case of a new strain of Mpox. The person had recently traveled to Eastern Africa and is reported to be isolating at home. Officials say the risk to the public is low, but are checking into the patient's contacts as a precaution. There's another E. coli outbreak. This time, it's linked to organic carrots. According to health officials, one person has died and at least 38 more were made ill. But they caution that the real number is likely much higher because many recover without medical attention and therefore are never tested or counted. Now let's dig up the past a little. In 2020, a 35,000-year-old saber-toothed kitten was found in Siberia in a remarkably well-preserved state. Its condition is due to being frozen in the permafrost. The findings of the study were published last week. A new study suggests that Australopithecus, like the famous Lucy discovered 50 years ago, might have used tools 3.2 million years ago. The study looked at advanced 3D models of the biomechanics of the hands of a few different species and found that, contrary to popular belief, they might have been capable of using tools. And now on to oddities. In 1986, Voyager 2 conducted a flyby of Uranus. During the flyby, the observations about the planet's magnetosphere were very surprising and led to the planet being labeled somewhat of an anomaly. A recent look at the data has revealed that the Voyager 2 flyby happened just as rare solar winds impacted the planet, and that event threw off the observations. Those in favor of bringing the woolly mammoth back from extinction have found a new argument in their favor. The belief is that bringing the animal back and returning it to the wild in Siberia might increase biodiversity and help with the climate. Their giant steps might help keep the ground frozen by exposing it to air. Researchers found amber in Antarctica, so that means Antarctica once had a rainforest. And now we're going to answer some of your questions. We had some questions about how wooden satellites can survive in the thermosphere and ionosphere without burning up. If you missed last week, a wooden satellite called LingoSat has made it to the International Space Station for testing. It was carried up to the station by a rocket. So once it's placed in orbit next month, why won't it burn up? The air is thin up there. Even though it can be hot, because the air is thin, there aren't enough gas molecules to actually transfer the energy to a satellite. On NASA's Spaceplace website, it says that even with the extremely hot temperatures in the thermosphere, a person would feel very cold. This particular satellite is made of a Japanese wood and was put together using an ancient Japanese woodworking technique called sashimono, which doesn't use nails or glue. The pieces just fit together tightly. While researchers aren't worried about it burning up, there is a curiosity about how the wood will expand and contract over its months in orbit. If the experiment is successful, it seems pretty likely that future satellites will be wood, and then when they hit re-entry and burn up, they won't leave behind pollution from melted metal.
Do you believe in paradox-free time travel? And have you heard of the work of physicist Germain Tobar?
I do not, and I had not heard of him. Since I hadn't heard of him, I looked into his work. It's interesting stuff. The general idea is that time travel is possible, but nothing a time traveler does really matters because it wouldn't alter the actual event. The idea seems to be that if a time traveler goes back to stop a ship from hitting an iceberg and sinking, if the time traveler was successful at avoiding the iceberg, well, here comes a torpedo. Stepping outside of science and theoretical physics for a moment, I believe there's a layperson's term for this, destiny or maybe fate.
When is your science fiction story channel coming? I'm dying here.
Soon. Just trying to figure everything out for it. Name, logo, and so on. It's hard. It's definitely coming, though. Of course, now I have to write a story about somebody paradoxically trying to create a time travel paradox, but space-time just keeps correcting itself to the same outcome. That looks like all the questions for this week. This week's quote is attributed to Margaret Macmillan. We can learn from history, but we can also deceive ourselves when we selectively take evidence from the past to justify what we have already made up our minds to do. So that's all the data we have to date. Hope you enjoyed it and hope to see you again soon.